Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the amazing launch of Remarkable Power of Stimulus. The book launch is live from Hollywood and Holland in Pennsylvania and also London in England. For those of you joining from around the world, please let us know where you're from in the chat window as we go through. We're delighted to have with us live from Pennsylvania, Gretchen, who is the author of Remarkable Power of Stimulus. We're going to do a little quick introduction to MX Publishing. We're going to talk briefly about the Remarkable Power of Stimulus, but we're going to dive straight in to a live performance. And we are blessed also to have the narrator of the book, Remarkable Power of Stimulus, which will be coming out soon in audio as well, JT McDaniel, and he's online too. So hi, JT.
JT.
And then we're going to do a quick author Q&A with Gretchen. So welcome everybody, and do feel free to fire into the chat window where you're from. Hooray for Hollywood, says Mike. Thank you. That's wonderful. So quick background to MX. We were founded 14 years ago in 2006. We have rapidly become the largest Sherlock Holmes publisher in the world. One of our authors referred to us as the largest, smallest publisher in the world, which is probably about right, I think. We have about 120 authors writing for us, mainly fiction and some non-fiction. We have about 400 titles, and we've actually sold about 2.3 million books.
Wow.
Which is quite incredible. Quite a large number of those were in Russia at one point. We actually had a lot in Russian. I'm looking up my bookshelf now, and there's a little collection of books in Russian too. We do print, we do ebooks. Audiobooks is growing. It's the fastest growing genre format for books in the world at the moment. We also do art. So the art of Sherlock Holmes is a big project, and we've started to do collectibles as well. We're supporting small craft artists across the US and in the UK as well who make Sherlock Holmes items. So we have a couple of hellos. Hi, Gretchen. Big hug from Dublin. So Ireland representing from Steve, and also from Mexico. Oh, hello, Mexico. So a big hi from Jennifer and Gary from Mexico as well. And some more from Pennsylvania. You know, they're close by. So there you go. The team at MX were all volunteers. It was founded by, behind every average man is a great woman, which is my dear lady wife, Sharon. So she supports me in MX, and we have two fantastic editors, a chap called Richard T. Ryan from New York, and David Markham as well, who edits the MX book of New Sherlock Holmes stories. So we are a social enterprise. We have three main causes that we support in the UK: Stepping Stones School, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and Happy Life Children's Home in Kenya, and we'll talk about that a bit as well. But one of the causes that we have is the UN World Food Programme, or WFP. I watched live today as the WFP received the Nobel Peace Prize.
Wow.
Quite an amazing thing, and a wonderful recognition for an organisation that keeps 90 million plus people fed every year. So it's an incredible thing today. If you get a chance to watch the presentation, that's fantastic. During COVID, we've been doing live shows like this. We've done a couple of performances, an evening with Sherlock Holmes and a Scandal in Nova Alba. You can find them both on our website. We do free performances, but generally we ask attendees to put a donation in if they're watching a theatre performance, because it supports the theatre companies. We're going to do another one. They've been really popular with called The Baron of Wimbledon. So we're going to be doing that in February. So if you keep in touch with MX Publishing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those kind of places, we'll be posting up, and you can come and watch for free Sherlock Holmes performance. quick note about Stepping Stones. So Stepping Stones is a school for children with learning disabilities. I've been a patron of the school since 2016, but we've actually been working with them since 2009. We do some events and we do awareness. Now you're wondering, you know, why does a Sherlock Holmes publisher get involved with a school in south of London called Stepping Stones? Well, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, actually lived there. So if you look at the picture there, the old-looking building straight in front of you is the original house that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had a hand in designing for his wife, who was poorly. And the school bought the building and renovated it and brought it up to code. And as a fan, if you ever visit the UK, you can actually go and visit Stepping Stones and sit in the very study that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote The Hand of the Baskervilles. The other major charity that we support is a wonderful project called Happy Life, Children's Home in Kenya. We've been working with them since 2012, and myself and my wife are mentors. That's my wife, Sharon, in picture. We do events, we do awareness for them, we do some projects. And Happy Life has saved the lives of over 600 abandoned babies in Kenya. And it's a sad Christmas this year because it's our first Christmas for the last 8 years where we're not actually able to go and spend a Christmas with the kids. So the last 7 years we've been there over Christmas and New Year with the kids, but obviously because of COVID, we're going to have to do that by the lovely Zoom. I should actually mention that Zoom are one of our sponsors. So a huge thank you to Zoom. They enable us to do events like this, and also all of our different projects around the world are Zoom enabled. So Happy Life, Stepping Stones, all of these guys have Zoom supporting. So thank you, Zoom. On to the subject of the evening. A Remarkable Power of Stimulus. This is one of my favorite series of books that we've published. Absolutely love them. And I agree with Wendy on this. So here's an extract from a recent review from Wendy Heyman-Marsall. Wendy wrote an amazing book called Mrs. Hudson's Kitchen, which is part back behind the scenes stories on Baker Street from Mrs. Hudson, but also it includes over 50 recipes that Mrs. Hudson would have created in the time of Sherlock Holmes as well. Highly recommend going visiting mrshudsonskitchen.com, where you can find out how to cook like Mrs. Hudson, but also find out all about the background of Holmes and Watson in that era. And I think Wendy hit the nail on the head when she talks about the character depictions that Gretchen has absolutely nailed in her two books. So Remarkable Power of Stimulus is the sequel to Scattered Houses, which is the first book. And you have all your favorite canonical characters featured in the book: Mrs. Hudson, Inspector Lestrade, Mycroft, and Holmes, and with a slightly different flavor, and we'll come on to that when we go to the Q&A. So as we head towards the live performance, I guess we need to check that we have Jack for the performance here. So I'm just having a little look. We certainly have lots of more attendees. So for those attendees that have joined us recently, please let us know where you're from. A big shout out from Paula from New York. So Gretchen, that's you may know Paula.
Oh yes.
Very friendly hello from New York. So I suspect she does know you. So if everybody else could add on where they're from in terms of a city and a country, that would be wonderful. We don't seem to have Jack.
Well, that's okay. I can do it.
Okay, no problem at all. So
It's a two-person play, but I can make it a one-person play.
Okay, so we've got while we're doing that, Dove says hi from Massachusetts, and Barbara from Bucks County. So that's Pennsylvania as well. So
Yes, that's where I am.
that's where you are, very close. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go to Gretchen. So, hey, Gretchen.
Hi, Steve.
So, would you like to dive into the reading from the book, and then we'll go
Sure.
to author Q&A. And as you pick up the book there, a big hi from Ken from Washington, D.C. So, all over the US.
Okay. I just want to say one thing. I used Wendy's recipes in this book. There is a wedding breakfast that happens in this book, and it's all Wendy's recipes. It's wait till you get to it. It's wonderful, very delicious. I was drooling while I was writing it. Okay. It is because he lives, and I hope that God will live forever, that I chronicle this account because he is my dear friend. Last night's affair of the empty house resulted in Sherlock Holmes' ingenious capture of the murderer of the Honorable Ronald Adair. For me, it began with my collar undone and the taste of brandy on my lips. The mist before my eyes cleared, and I was filled with the incredible excitement of Holmes' miraculous reappearance in my surgery. It was April 1st of the great year 1894, a year that would become one of the busiest of our association. Holmes somehow deduced that I was single again, and in his casual way invited me to return to our rooms in Baker Street. I awoke in the morning, and the plane tree greeted me, covered in new spring buds, outside the window of my old familiar bedroom. I took a breath, and his horrible first pipe filled my heart with gratitude. Today I wasn't alone. Sherlock Holmes was back. Last night we poached an evildoer, Colonel Sebastian Moran, the second most dangerous man in London. My interest in how our detective business would carry on after Holmes' time away was significant, and I worried about him. 3 years of hardships and wonders could change a man. Would he still be the supreme analytical thinker I knew? Would I still be the partner he needed? Coming off. Okay, where am I? He was a little too lean for my taste, yet muscled, toned, quicker, and more lethal for any who would choose murder as a profession. His explorations, both actual and spiritual, expanded his already worldly attitude. His sojourn in New York brought him home to our consulting practice. I carried my stored boxes down from the attics. They were piled high, and I was juggling, unable to see over the top. It was good to be sharing rooms with Holmes again, so different from the first time. My life had changed me, too. I opened the door, and my eyes swept the room, looking for a place to put down the boxes. They alighted on my unmade bed, and immediately tears dotted the boxes in my arms. Mary, oh, that you would also return. Countless times I've run down these stairs at Holmes' command, his voice full of the thrill of the chase. It was my name he called. Glancing again at the bed, I thought, what did I forget? Could Mrs. Hudson be slipping? From the bottom of the stairs, Holmes said, do you need help unpacking, my friend? He helped me move the rest of my boxes into my bedroom. Do you recall the case of the red-headed gentleman and his artificial kneecaps, and the dangerous man on the tour in the ghastly Grimpen Mire? Our boisterous laughter swept through all 3 floors of our Baker Street abode as we replayed old memories and worked together to bring us both home to number 221B. Holmes stretched out on my bed as I unpacked and opened up to me. Oops. Oh, I missed you, Watson. I know you horribly mourned my death, but I wasn't dead. After my travels for Mycroft, I spent my last year alone, besting Moriarty's assassins. I'm ashamed to say I became like them in order to survive. No finesse, no pretty problems to solve, and no you, my dear Watson. All of it a horror. Stupidest idea I ever had. But it was only supposed to be 6 months. Why it continued beyond that time, I have no answer for you. Against all reason, I had the strong impression that some outside agency was compelling me, exiling me from London. Possibly a cocaine induced hallucination, but alone in the wilds, it seemed as if some cruel and powerful hand had command of me. As if from his watery grave, Moriarty was pulling the strings. Those hallucinations, Holmes, were they frequent? Doctor, I will require your competent medical assistance with the removal of this drug from my life. I am sure you have the means to get me through it. Strangely enough, the morphia that was forced on me at Hudson Asylum worked well, though a much lower dose would probably be best. Come now, Watson, my new clients will take care of it. He smiled and patted my back. Excuse me. I had thought a handful of Moriarty's henchmen were left, but I faced 30 more. Frederick E. Baines, Jack Newham, Simon Worth, Mortimer Connon, Wilford Davis, Joseph Harrison. Holmes, stop this at once. I bested each one, but each time I killed, my life was on the line. Watson, I imagine it's my closest to what you faced in Afghanistan. I doubt that, I said disgustedly. He looked at me surprised. Only what the advanced men, or Mycroft's boys, faced. I was surrounded by fighting men who had my back. If I weren't, I'd be in some mass grave in another land. Holmes, I had no idea you faced so many. If I had been there with you, but you must purge their names from your memory. They were hired killers, not soldiers. Promptly release yourself from it. Their names are dangerous to your mind and well being. I can write them up with the details of their demise and give them to the appropriate authorities, I suppose. My doctor's senses roused. You will not. Justice has already been served through your hand, Holmes. It's over. Assassins deserve hard justice. You and I and your profession deserve a complete Sherlock Holmes, not a mind cramped with the memories of the evil men whom you of necessity killed. I've seen men lose their focus, their senses, and their humanity. They live tortured lives lost in the battles they once fought. They squander their loved ones and usually wind up besotted with drink or the poppy. Let go of it now, Holmes. We walked downstairs to the sitting room. Thank you, Watson. I knew you would want to be with me, and that thought got me through it. He shook his head slowly. But I'm afraid the way of the assassin is a lonely one. I am glad it is past. Though 3 years is formidable, it seems like 10. I will attempt to make room in my brain addict. Yet here we are again in our Baker Street rooms, ready for the next little problem to walk up those 17 stairs. That is my therapy. At our fireplace, he took a cigarette, and I threw him the matchbox. He drew in the smoke and smiled at me, though we may have to wait for some mention of my return in the press for that to happen. The ringing of the Baker Street doorbell jarred us from our comfortable morning. We listened like hounds as someone pushed his way past Mrs. Hudson. Mr. Holmes doesn't see anyone without an appointment. Slow, heavy footfalls as our large mystery ascended the stairs. We quickly looked to each other. I grabbed the poker, and Holmes palmed his derringer. In stepped Sir Borrodaile Savory, St. Bartholomew the Greater Priory Church rector. He had gasped and panted his way to the top step. I poked at the fire and replaced the poker, stood, shook his hand, and steered him to the settee. Holmes said, "Welcome, Sir Borrodaile. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson." I put a cup of tea into the rector's hands while Holmes turned his back and deftly shelved his gun. Facing the window, He began his analysis of the rector's appearance and state of mind. I see you have started your day in some haste, as your left ear still has soap from shaving, your clerical collar is sideways, and your waistcoat ill-buttoned. He turned to face Savory and glanced at his attire. From the mortar on your soles and the lime dusting the tops of your boots, you must have traveled through the construction in the church to avoid those who would shout their curses in Clothfair Street. I would also deduce that your wife is away, but this last has nothing to do with why you are here. Savory adjusted his collar and rebuttoned, looking at my friend with astonishment. Yes, Mr. Holmes, I was awakened this morning by dreadful howls from outside the church. I may tell you, such bloodthirsty shrieks are no way to arise. I left through the cemetery gate and thankfully caught a cab. The Catholics want to reclaim it. Others demand its closing. The Restoration Committee is up in arms. It's cursed, you know. He wrung his hands. This is catastrophe. Our beautiful reconstruction ruined by this ghoulish mess. You must solve it. It is the only way the public will be appeased. I was overjoyed when Inspector Lestrade told me you were back in London. Solving this mystery would be your perfect re-entry. The Priory Church must be saved, Mr. Holmes. Since the 11th century, it has survived war, famine, fire, flood, and the Puritans. Surely it will survive this, too. It stood for 8 centuries, 8 centuries. And now, during my time, this divine piece of English history is ruined in an afternoon. I can't allow it. I won't allow it. Rumor is a corrosive, Rector. It can decimate the loftiest towers. To neutralize this trend, compose yourself and tell me the facts from the beginning. Mr. Holmes, the papers have it right. I don't know how, but the Lady Chapel bled, or at least its ghastly footprints did. He opened the snuff box, took a pinch, and sighed. It was unstable. We have secured the walls, the ceiling, and begun to reglaze the windows. It was a labor of love for our architect. The first aspect of both the chapels and the crypt's reconstruction is about to be completed. On Sunday, I unveiled our work as proof the chapel could be brought right, and now this. It represented the whole devotional aspect of this reconstruction project. He rubbed his hand across his forehead. Holmes waved him on. A fortnight ago, I realized the committee would be able to view it before the official opening with no sign of calamity during that time. When we lit the lamps and candelabras during the small unveiling, we found fresh, bloody footprints across the floor, and now this lurid mess is in every paper. The church is doomed, Mr. Holmes. Calm yourself, Savory. Why did you wait 2 days to call me in? The press, Mr. Holmes. Scotland Yard assured me they would quell their howls, but as you see, he picked up the paper from the floor. Sorry, no paper. No props. What day did the construction end? When was your unveiling? Mr. Holmes, chapel construction work paused on Friday at 4 p.m. The unveiling was Sunday at 12. You saw nothing amiss in those 44 hours, not until noon of Sunday last? I presume you chanced to inspect it through the weekend? Yes, I admired it every day and found nothing wrong. What time was your last survey? The men who carried out the reconstruction were of good character? Saturday, 12 p.m. Yes, of course, everything was handled professionally. The builders were overseen by our architect, Sir Ashton Webb, and all were members of the appropriate guilds. At the end of the day, the cleaners came in and arranged chairs for our visitors. I set up an altar. All was in readiness. A stage set for triumph instead became a horrible tragedy. Watson, would you be so kind as to get your coat and find us a cab? Sir Borodale, I would just change out of my dressing gown. He entered his bedroom and I did as he asked. Holmes and the rector stepped out to the waiting carriage. He extended his hand in that protective honoring of those in your charge and swept the rector into the cab. We stepped in and traveled to the church. Many years ago, our mutual friend Stamford introduced two men destined to find an incomparable partner in one another at nearby St. Bart's Hospital. Holmes read my mind. Watson, we're going down memory lane. I patted his knee. Outside the halls and churchyard, there was a group of angry, chanting protesters. I wondered what this meant for the hospital. To avoid the crowd, the rector and I marched in through the western gate and through the cemetery. Holmes parted the crowd, ran under the Henry VIII arch, and dashed into the open church. He pointed his walking stick. The Lady Chapel is this way. He charged through to the chapel. Oops. I lost it. Sorry. Come back. He charged through to the chapel, dropped his coat and hat on the sarcophagus next to the entrance, and pointed out marks on the floor, then entered the chapel. Here the darkness was total, every window blocked from the elements, while new ones were constructed at the guild house. The Lady Chapel was at the farthest point from the nave entrance, and Savory was out of breath as he walked in. Holmes struck a match to his pocket torch and shined it on the grisly scene, the odor of decaying blood its most apparent aspect. Holmes said, "Rector, dispel this darkness." Savory ordered workmen to bring tall candelabras, and we placed them to light the space. Each candle lit illuminated more of the disaster. I righted and set ablaze additional candelabras which had splashed wax where they had fallen. It looked like the aftermath of a brawl. An altar and tall cross had crashed to the floor. Holmes held the candelabra aloft as he bent to it. His light revealed two pairs of bloody footprints, beginning at the eastern end on the southern side of the chapel, through the length and to the outer side door at the western end. They led out and not in. Holmes swiftly examined the footprint's end point. The door showed recent signs of use, opened easily, and led directly outside. We stepped out, took some clean, free breaths, and searched for further prints in the dry ground. We re-entered, determined to solve this putrid puzzle. Holmes moved systematically through the space. I knew he was mapping out the chapel in his mind. There were piles of ancient brick and dry mortar everywhere. He put out his arm. "Keep back, Watson." I was grateful to stand at the open door where daylight streamed and the air was clear. He measured the bloody footmarks. They began dramatically as if their makers had been dropped there. "Do you have lanterns, Rector?" "Yes, I think so." Sir Borrodaile left. Holmes said, "Watson, this conundrum is one of the darkest we have ever examined, and I'm certain that before we are through, it promises to become unspeakably darker." "I couldn't see my hand in front of my face," I said as I walked up to him, my candlelight joining with his. Holmes turned to me. "How could Savory see any blood or changes during his inspections? Watson, from these footprints, one was probably medium height and wore square-toed boots, unusual in the city. The other wore very singular boots, size 10 or 11. He paced next to the footmarks. By the length of his stride, he was close to my height. The rector returned with two lanterns and handed one to each of us. "Savory, had the candles shown recent use at the time you lit them on Sunday?" "Now that you mention it, yes. Curious." "There is a crypt under this chapel?" Sir Borrodaile righted the cross. "Yes, Mr. Holmes. If one examines the singular behavior of the footprints, it is clear that this is an entranceway. Come, Watson." What happens next brings Holmes and I into a gruesome murder unlike any of our long association. Yet through this involvement, the 3-year rift in our partnership is cemented. More than that, I dare not tell. Don't have a hat. I just have to bow.
Fantastic. Lots of lovely comments starting to flow through, Gretchen. I think JT has some competition in the narration there. That was lovely.
Hmm?
I was transported into the story there.
No way. he's he's the best.
Yeah, he certainly is. He did an amazing job with Scattered Houses, and I can't wait to hear his narration of this one. So
Me too.
we're going to go into the author Q&A now. For those of you online, there's a couple of options. You can either post in the chat window your questions, or there is actually a Q&A section as well. Whenever we do these events, I'm always intrigued by the fact that some people go across to the Q&A section because they feel like, it says Q&A, so we're going to do some Q&A, so we'll do it in the Q&A section. But most people just put their questions into the chat. And while people type, I've got my questions here as well, Gretchen, my own questions. And as the compare, I feel like I get the chance to ask the first question of the evening. How did you first encounter Holmes?
How did I first encounter Holmes? I was 6 years old, and Ronald Howard was doing a TV show in the 50s, and I discovered the show with my mystery-loving mom, and fell in love with the whole thing. Fell in love with England, with Fogs, with Holmes, with the stories, as truncated as they were for a half an hour show. But and the relationship between Holmes and Watson at 6. And then 6 years later, I read Conan Doyle in high school. Not as in America, it's not. Conan Doyle is not actually not part of the curriculum, unfortunately. But it was just my private reading.
So it's interesting. A few of our authors are actually teachers, and they've actually made Sherlock Holmes part of the curriculum.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool. So there's a lady called Tracy Revels, and she has an amazing fantasy series that's Shadow Fall and Shadow Blood and Shadow Wraith, I think. And Sherlock Holmes is a warlock, so it's quite a fantasy kind of thing. But in real life, she's a teacher, and she actually has managed to get Sherlock Holmes on the curriculum. So her kids learn Sherlock Holmes. I must admit, I wish I had Sherlock Holmes when I was a kid at school, because we had Shakespeare, and I found
Oh yeah, well, Shakespeare.
Yeah, I find it tough to relate.
Shakespeare's fantastic.
It's great, but it's difficult to relate to. We have some questions starting to come through on the chat. Nobody's bold enough to go onto the Q&A quite yet this evening, but on the chat. So a great question coming from Mike from Florida, which is, do you start with the solution and then work out the clues, or do you go the other way around? Go clues and then solution?
Do I start with the clues and then go to the solution? Oh, Jack's here.
Hi, sorry, I slept through my alarm.
Hey, Jack.
Hi. Let me.
How you doing, Jack?
I'm good. Sorry, different time zone. Let me just.
There's many different time zones here.
1 second. Sorry, let me just turn on the light. It's a little dark. Okay, there we go. That should be down. Okay. Oh.
You missed it.
No worries. You can watch it on replay. It's a bit like Netflix.
That's right. You can watch it on replay.
It's
oh no.
No worries.
What?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So the question from Mike is, do you start with the solution and then work out the clues, or do you work the other way around? Do you start with bits of the story and then get to the solution eventually?
I start with my characters, and we basically write it together. And I had most of the time. Well, my first book, I had a family problem that I wanted to solve. One of my ancestors, and so that I knew where I was going right from the beginning. Um, but the second one came out of the first one, and I had no idea what it was going to be. And my characters and I wrote it together. Basically, I just started writing. I mean, my favorite way to write is when my characters wake me up and there's dialogue. One of my characters, and there's dialogue going on in my ears, and I run to my computer and I start writing it down as fast as I can, and then that takes me through the day, and I keep following that to see where it goes.
I do love that. I think very few people know this, but I started my publishing career as a novelist, and the way I write is by hand. I've tried to write.
Oh my God!
I can't do it. I can't do it. I literally write, and I can see the scene happening in front of my eyes. So I'll be sitting there, and when I get quiet, the characters start talking to me, but the whole scene starts to play out in front of me. But I can only do it on a pen and paper. I found that with a computer, there's a temptation to fix the errors as you type, and I'm not a great typist, so I'm making errors. Next question that's come in is, what's your favorite story from the canon?
That's a very, very difficult question for me, because I'm coming from the inside of it. I have been reading and studying Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, Sherlock Holmes stories, for a long, long time, and and every one of them has their blue carbuncle. Let's see. I would say the first one, Study in Scarlet, I love because of the meeting of Holmes and Watson, and also how young they are. The two young men meeting for the first time and moving into Mrs. Hudson's house. And then Devil's Foot. I love the Devil's Foot. It's also the ones I love the most are they're all about their relationships, but both of those are create their relationships in different ways. And the Devil's Foot is I love because of Watson's rescue of Holmes. You know, I mean, he's lost in his experiment, and his experiment is about to take his brain away, and Watson's, but Watson saves him, and I love that.
Fantastic. So we've got the challenge has been accepted, and people are diving onto the Q&A window as well as the chat window. So now I have to look at both. We'll finish off the chat window. How are you able to develop the setting and the place for the stories with such accurate detail? I can tell you how I did it. I had to go to the places.
Exactly.
This was a great excuse for me to. My first novel was set in Budapest mainly, so I went to Budapest.
Wow.
My second one was set in Havana, so I went to Havana.
Hi, Michael.
Do you go to the places? Do you see the places? Is that how you write?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, you know, we have this wonderful miracle of the internet, which is fantastic for research, but I can't. I mean, you can only go so far. And for me, I have to go, and I was very, very lucky to spend two autumn into winter, um, 2 years in a row. I lived there for 3 months, and in London, and I did not go there as a tourist. I went there as um, Holmes and Watson, and walked where they walked. And I mean, like, I went to the British Museum and the library, and I didn't go in there um, for me. I went in there, I walked into the British Museum and went from place to place as I thought Holmes would do. And that's the way I see London. I don't go to any tourist places, unfortunately,
Fantastic.
except the Sherlock Holmes pub.
Yeah, and obviously the Sherlock Holmes pub, where we have frequented ourselves together. We have met there. So a comment from Neve. I had the honour of being at the Our Lady Chapel with Gretchen. So
that's right.
Our Lady Chapel. Fantastic. So
one of many moments we had.
So a couple of questions on the Q&A window. So Pamela says, Gretchen, where do you get the inspiration to write? I thoroughly enjoyed Scattered Houses. I'm looking forward to more. So what inspires you? How do you do you wake up? How do you wake up? Do you wake up in the morning and say, I've got to write some stuff, or what gets you?
Well, no, I am extremely lucky. Once I decided to write, and in the process I went through with the first book, I just write. I get up, I write from the minute I'm up, from the minute I go back to sleep, with occasional meals in between. And I was born with a tremendous imagination and intuition, and determination. And I had one bad day on the first book where I couldn't write, just one. And I spent the day doing what Sherlock Holmes would do, making music. And the next day I was back writing. My second book, the one we're talking about today, I had 2 weeks of not being able to write. And I probably should have gone to the beach for those 2 weeks, but I didn't. And but then I started writing again, and I can't stop. I have 2 books right now I'm working on, 2 novels, and I will get back to that probably in January or February.
And Remarkable is the second in a trilogy, isn't it? So
yes, it's a trilogy. The next book, I have no idea what it's going to be called, but it is. It definitely wants me to write it. It's like a 4-year-old pulling at my skirts.
I have the same. I wrote my first in 1997, the second in 2000, and I'm still waiting to write the third. I got distracted with this whole publishing thing, so
yeah,
maybe I need
really.
to.
It is extremely time consuming. I can't imagine.
Yeah, a little distracted. The question from Ken: what was the inspiration for Remarkable? What you tackle some interesting themes in your 2 books, which I love about your writing. So, what was the inspiration there?
Well, before I go to that, I just want to say we are all incredibly grateful for your energy in MX Publishing, because you've helped so many of us to do what we're supposed to do, to create from our hearts. What was the inspiration? The inspiration was the first novel. The first novel ended where it had to end, and then the second novel began right where the first one ended. And I don't know how to answer that, what the inspiration was. The inspiration was
Well,
that
maybe,
I have to write it, that I have to keep writing, and I want to keep writing, and I know there's another story there. It's very interesting to start a novel without knowing what the ending is going to be, or even what the murder is going to be. If you're writing a murder mystery, or what the mystery is going to be, and it's like leaping off a cliff and knowing that you have wings. It's amazing.
yeah, it's kind of scary. I found with my writing, I knew where I started. I had no idea where it was going to finish, and um, writing was quite cathartic for me. It was like flowing out of me the characters onto the page. And one of the questions for me is that behind you on the wall there's some fantastic Sherlockian things. The one that stands out the most over your left shoulder there is a gentleman that many people will recognise in the top hat. Young JB. So tell us a little bit about Jeremy Brett and why he has a special place in your heart.
Okay. That's a book in itself. And actually, Maureen Whittaker wrote that book. um, uh, it's very hard to let's just say that he's very um, inspirational. I mean, not just his incredible definitive portrayal of Sherlock Holmes, but the work he went through to make that series what it was, to fight with the suits at excuse me, sorry, Steve, at Granada Studios, so that he could get as much of Arthur Conan Doyle's words I mean, he wanted to treat it all as literature, and he fought every single film. He fought for a week. He fought the writers so that Doyle's words would be used instead of theirs. And that's a hell of a job. I won't tell you. I can't. I mean, I have a little experience with television, and it's coming up against people like that is very difficult. So, and what he did, beside, along with his portrayal and all the incredible things that Granada did do, the historical beauty of it all, inspires me. His determination and his creativity, and so.
Yeah,
yes.
we published a script of a play which was performed all over the north of England, which is written by a chap called Denal Alley, which is called The Curse of Sherlock Holmes, and it's a play about Jeremy Brett's life and how the portrayal of Holmes had really consumed him, and it became a real obsession for him. Such a contrast for me, really, with Conan Doyle himself, who became kind of bored with Sherlock Holmes as a character in his later life. And interestingly, and we've spoken about this before on interviews, Conan Doyle killed off Sherlock Holmes at the Reichenbach Falls.
Tried.
Yeah, and fully intended for him to stay dead, right? But it was, if you remember back to the presentation with Stepping Stone School at Undershaw, it was the fact that Undershaw was running way over budget as a project for him that Conan Doyle needed the dosh. He needed the cash, so he reluctantly agreed to bring Sherlock Holmes back to life.
Yep.
In the empty house, and
after 10 years.
Yeah, and there were all the fans were clamoring for Sherlock Holmes, and it's interesting to look at the. We were looking back. One of the authors we've published quite a bit of is Alistair Duncan, who is a very interesting historian. He's done 3 biographies of Conan Doyle, and in one of his biographies, he talks about how the amount of money that the Strand was paying Conan Doyle was very similar to what you would pay an NFL footballer or in the
Wow.
for the UK fans, a Premiership footballer. It was that kind of money for every story. And before he agreed to bring him back to life, they kept increasing the amount of money that they were offering for the stories. But Conan Doyle felt the character was trivial compared to what was going on in the real world. But what was interesting was that it became a worldwide phenomenon, like nothing else, and
Still is.
yeah, holds the world record, the Guinness World Record for the most portrayed character on stage and screen. So, what's next? I guess the final question for the evening, Gretchen, is what's next for you with Holmes? How is your love affair with Holmes going to continue? What's the next step?
Let's see. Well, the third one in this series is going to take us back to the beginning of the film industry, the real beginning, back to Méliès and Edison, and it's going to be Holmes and Watson are going to be traveling back to France. They'll be in England. They'll travel to France, and then I can't tell you. I can't tell you. But anyway, it's going to involve that very, very early film industry before it started in Hollywood, when it was in New Jersey, and in outside of Paris, also. So I'm very excited about that. And then my other book, I can't tell you about. It's just started, and it's too soon to tell, because you never know. The thing about writing a novel is it starts out one way and usually ends up a whole different way. Mine do anyway. And it's just amazing. The process is a trip. It's just incredible. And I wanted to say, a minute? I just wanted to say that so many seem afraid to take the plunge, to publish a book or move to the next level in an endeavor that is important to them. Holmes might call it oscillation on the planet. I'm here to tell you that what is on the other side of that leap into the unknown is not an abyss, but another set of friends. Don't be afraid to go out to meet them. So I just wanted to add a little, because it's true. You may jump into an incredible community like MX Publishing, which is all the writers that Steve mentioned. We're a community and we're there for each other. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then everybody else, like JT, who is the most wonderful narrator.
Yeah, I'm really. I've heard a few of the chapters, as is the publisher's right to listen to things before they're out. I've listened to a few of the chapters, and it sounds fantastic. I think it's about halfway through. I mean, JT may comment on the chat window as to where he's got to.
We talked recently.
Yeah, I've listened to the first few. So I guess my last question of the evening is, who are your favourite pasticheurs of the era? Have you got somebody you want to give a shout out to?
Okay. I've just discovered Rex Stout, who wrote was a radical Baker Street irregular, who wrote in 1944. He wrote this. Whoop, sorry about that. He wrote this wonderful article called "Watson Was a Woman," and it's really funny. It's hilarious. I wish I could write the way he does. It's from first word to last. You're laughing, and so anyway, and then there's as far as MX goes, there's Jerry Shear is incredible. Susan Knight is also. They're both exceptional novelists. And then I mentioned Maureen Whitaker. She's a biographer who writes with her heart. And then my favorite, I have the book out so that you can see it, is Peter Koppel. He writes graphic novels, and he's incredible. He's Czechoslovakian, and his artwork is amazing. This is the Holmes explaining what happened at the Reichenbach. Anyway.
So I'm so glad you mentioned Petter. So a few years ago, Jay Ganguly, who is the chairman of the Sherlock Holmes Society of India, asked us for a favour to meet with Petter. Petter had just won the Czech Republic Comic Book Artist of the Year award for his book Scandal in Bohemia, which is Sherlock Holmes novel in graphic form. And Jay said to us, Petter has got a massive fan base in India, and they've been buying his book in the Czech language, not being able to read it because the artwork is so amazing. So can you please publish it in English so that the rest of the world can see this guy's amazing art? And Petter flew to London and met with myself, and he came to one of our events. He had a translator, and we talked a lot about Sherlock Holmes, and we talked about his amazing work. And it was our very first Kickstarter, because the translation cost from Czech Republic language to English was quite high. So we set up this campaign, and the fans absolutely loved it. And we've actually published all of his Sherlock Holmes graphic novels, The Final Problem, Hand of the Baskervilles, Scandal in Bohemia, and he also did a Challenger book as well. The Lost World as well. But and he's an amazing fellow. He's got an amazing sense of humour, which is kind of exciting because when you're working through a translator, he says something incredibly funny, and then it goes through the translator, and then you find it funny. So he's got like a time delay on his humour, which is quite cool. And Will has asked, when will the book come out? So
what book?
Remarkable. So Will, Remarkable is
it's out. Will,
it's out. You can get it now. It's on. It's on Amazon and all good bookstores, as we are supposed to say. Last chance for everybody to fire in their final question for Gretchen on the Q&A or on the chat window. We do have an update from hot off the press from JT, which says he is currently editing chapter 21. How far is that through? I haven't got it in front of me. How many chapters is that from the end, Gretchen?
See, I can't tell you.
I should know this.
I remember. 26 is the last one.
Okay, so 21 of 26. So we're really there. So all that remains, Gretchen, is to say thank you so much for letting us into your Sherlock Holmes world. And it's been a delight working with you. It's been wonderful meeting you in London. And COVID,
yes.
Hopefully we will meet up again, either in Pennsylvania, in Holland, or in London. And a big thank you to everybody who's joined us around the world. I think we've had 7 or 8 countries of fans around the world joining us tonight.
Yes.
So thank you so much. You can
Thank you, Steve.
yeah, you can rewatch this on replay. Not quite Netflix, but it's on mxpublishing.com. So we'll sort that out. Sort that
Yes.
later. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us online.
You're welcome. Thank you.